9 boundaries that build discipline and inner strength. Samurai self-respect. Rain fell in sheets as Hiroshi knelt in the temple garden, mud seeping through his hakama. Around him, the other students had long since sought shelter. But he remained not out of devotion, but desperation. He was 26 years old and utterly lost. Despite years of training, he felt hollow, directionless. He trained when he felt like it, stopped when he didn't. He made commitments and broke them. He sought approval from everyone and respected himself not at all. You are still here. Master Yamamoto stood in the temple doorway, dry under the overhang, observing with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone, into the truth beneath. I don't know where else to go, Hiroshi admitted, his voice barely audible over the rain. Then you have come to the right place, but not for the reasons you think. The old master stepped into the rain without hesitation, his white hair darkening as water soaked through. You seek strength, you seek discipline, you seek purpose, but you look for them outside yourself. In techniques and teachings, you are searching in the wrong direction. He knelt beside Hiroshi, ignoring the mud, the rain, the discomfort. The samurai understood something that modern people have forgotten. True strength does not come from what you can endure from others. It comes from what you will not tolerate from yourself. Hiroshi looked up, confused. Come inside. It is time you learned about boundaries. The foundation of self-respecting. The warmth of the temple hall, steam rising from their wet clothes. Master Yamamoto prepared tea with deliberate care. Each movement was precise, bounded by intention. What do you think a boundary is? He asked. A line others shouldn't cross. Incomplete. That is the common understanding, and it is why most people remain weak. Yamamoto poured the tea with absolute attention, not a drop spilled. A boundary is not primarily about others. It is a promise you make to yourself about who you will be, regardless of what others do. He handed Hiroshi the cup. The samurai lived by a kodobushi. This code was not a set of rules imposed from outside. It was a series of boundaries they set for themselves. I will behave with honor, whether others do or not. I will keep my word, whether it benefits me or not. I will face fear, whether I feel brave or not. But that sounds exhausting, Hiroshi said. Always having to be perfect. No, not perfect, bounded. Yamamoto's voice was gentle but firm. Perfection is impossible and seeking it leads to despair. But living within chosen boundaries, this creates discipline. And discipline creates self-respect creates the inner strength you desperately seek. He settled into seiza, his posture impeccable despite his age. I will teach you the 9 boundaries that the samurai used to build unshakable character. These are not rules I am imposing on you. They are invitations to impose structure on yourself. And that self-imposed structure is the only true freedom. Boundary 1. The boundary of time. The first boundary, Yamamoto began, is the most fundamental. Respecting your own time as you would respect a master's time. He gestured to a water clock in the corner, its steady drip marking moments. You arrived late to training 17 times last month. Each time you had a reason: traffic, oversleeping, a previous commitment that ran long. These reasons felt valid to you. Yes, Hiroshi nodded, embarrassed. But what you were actually saying, each time, was, my word to myself means nothing. My commitment to my own growth is conditional. My time has no value. Yamamoto, let that sink in. The samurai understood. How you treat your own time teaches you how much you respect yourself. He stood and walked to a scroll hanging on the wall, depicting a samurai at dawn. They rose before sunrise, not because someone forced them, but because they had promised themselves they would. That promise, kept or broken, determined everything else. But what if something genuinely important comes up? Hiroshi asked. Then you make a conscious choice and accept the consequence. The boundary is not that nothing can interrupt you. The boundary is that you acknowledge when you choose to break a commitment to yourself, and you do not lie to yourself about it. Yamamoto returned to his seat. Starting tomorrow, you will set 3 time boundaries. First, the time you will wake. Second, the time you will train. Third, the time you will sleep. These are not flexible goals. These are walls you build around your day. You may choose where to place the walls, but once placed, you honor them. Practice. Choose your 3 time boundaries. Write them down. For 30 days. Keep them without exception. When temptation to break them arises, it will pause and ask, am I making a conscious choice, or am I lying to myself? Choose consciously, but choose rarely. Boundary 2. The boundary of word. The second boundary is sacred, Yamamoto said, his voice taking on weight. It is the boundary between your word and your action. He placed a short sword on the floor between them. When a samurai made a promise, his honor was tied to that blade. To break his word was to dishonor the sword, which was to dishonor himself. In extreme cases, this dishonor required seppuku ritual suicide. Hiroshi's eyes widened. I do not suggest you should die for breaking promises, Yamamoto said with a hint of a smile. But I suggest you should feel something when you do. Most people make promises casually, and break them just as casually. I'll call you tomorrow. I'll start that project next week. I'll lose weight this year. Words without weight. Promises without price. He picked up the sword, examining it. The samurai spoke rarely, and promised less. Why? Because every word carried weight. When they said I will do this, It was as binding as a contract written in blood. How do I develop this? By establishing a boundary. Your word is law. When you say you will do something, even something small, even something said only to yourself, you do it. Or you consciously acknowledge the failure and accept the loss of self-trust that comes with it. Yamamoto set the sword down. This boundary transforms everything. You will begin to speak more carefully. You will make fewer commitments, but keep them all. You will stop making promises to placate others. And gradually, you will develop something precious, the ability to trust yourself. Practice. For the next month, make only promises you are absolutely certain you can keep. Better to say I cannot commit to that than to say yes and fail. When you make a promise to yourself, treat it as seriously as a promise to your master. Keep a written record of promises made and kept. Watch your self-trust grow. Boundary 3. The boundary of attention. The third boundary, Yamamoto said, reaching for his tea, is the boundary of complete presence. He took a sip, his attention wholly absorbed in the act. Not thinking about the next topic, not planning his words, just drinking tea with full awareness. You are here, in body, he said, setting down the cup, but where is your mind? Already planning your response? Thinking about what you'll do after we finish? Wondering what I think of you? Yes, Hiroshi flushed. It was completely true. This fragmented attention is epidemic in your generation. You eat while watching screens. You converse while checking messages. You train while your mind wanders to 1,000 other places. This is not merely rudite, it's self-destructive. Yamamoto leaned forward. The samurai knew. Attention is the currency of life. Where you place it determines who you become. Scattered attention creates a scattered self. Bounded attention creates an integrated self. He demonstrated. When I drink tea, I drink tea. When I teach, I teach. When I fight, I fight. One thing. Completely. This is not natural, it must be practiced. It is a boundary you must enforce. When I am doing this, I am only doing this. But isn't multitasking more efficient? No. Research from your modern scientists confirms what samurai knew centuries ago. Divided attention accomplishes less, remembers less, and experiences less. You think you are doing more by multitasking. Actually, you are living less. Practice. Choose 3 activities each day for bounded attention. When eating breakfast, only eat, no phone, no reading, no planning. When conversing, only converse, eye contact, active listening, full presence. When training, only train mind and body united. Notice how different these experiences feel. Notice how much more alive you become. Boundary 4. The boundary of consumption. Yamamoto stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked garden. The 4th boundary is what you allow into your mind and body. He turned back to Hiroshi. The samurai ate simply, not from poverty but from discipline. They consumed information carefully, not from lack of access but from wisdom. They understood. You become what you consume. You mean diet? Diet? Yes, but much more. Mental diet, emotional diet, spiritual diet. Yamamoto counted on his fingers. You consume food that makes you sluggish. You consume entertainment that makes you passive. You consume news that makes you anxious. You consume social comparison that makes you inadequate. And then you wonder why you lack discipline and strength. He returned to his seat. The boundary is this. I will be deliberate about what I allow into my system. Not restrictive from deprivation, but selective from self-respect. Yamamoto picked up a rice cake. This is simple, clean, nourishing. The samurai ate such food because it honored their bodies, purpose to be strong, clear, ready. They did not eat garbage and expect excellence. The same with information. You scroll endlessly through digital noise, consuming opinions of strangers, outrage of the moment, meaningless distraction, then you wonder why your mind is chaotic. Practice. Establish consumption boundaries in 3 areas. Physical. Identify 3 foods that drain your energy and eliminate them for 30 days. Mental. Set specific times for consuming news and social media. Outside those times, abstain completely. Spiritual. Choose what you read and watch carefully. Does it elevate you or diminish you? Consume only what serves your growth. Boundary 5. The boundary of response. The 5th boundary, Yamamoto said, is perhaps the most difficult. The boundary between stimulus and response. He clapped his hands suddenly, sharply. Hiroshi flinched. You see? Stimulus. Immediate reaction. No space, no choice. This is how most people live, at the mercy of their reactions. Yamamoto stood and walked behind Hiroshi. Someone insults you. You react with anger. Someone praises you. You react with pleasure. Someone challenges you. You react with defensiveness. You are a puppet, and the world pulls your strings. He came back around. The samurai trained to create a boundary, a gap between what happens and how they respond. In that gap lives all human freedom. Yamamoto told a story. There was once a samurai named Takechi who was publicly insulted by a drunk ronin. Everyone expected Takechi to draw his sword. Instead, he stood perfectly still for the length of 10 breaths. Then he said, I have considered your words and find them unworthy of response, and walked away. He wasn't afraid, Hiroshi asked, terrified, but he had trained to create the gap. In that gap, he could choose. respond from wisdom or react from emotion. The gap gave him freedom. How do I create this gap? Through practice. Every time something happens pleasant or unpleasant, you pause. Just for a breath. In that pause, you acknowledge, something has happened. I am feeling a response arising. Now I choose how to act. Practice. Implement the one breath boundary. When anything triggers emotion, an insult, a compliment, a disappointment, a surprise, take one complete breath before responding. In that breath, observe the emotion without being controlled by it. Then choose your response consciously. This single practice, done consistently, will transform your life. Boundary 6. The boundary of solitude. The sixth boundary. Yamamoto said, lighting incense is the boundary of aloneness. He settled back. You are afraid to be alone with yourself, so you fill every moment with noise, with company, with distraction. You wake and immediately check your phone. You eat with entertainment. You go to sleep with sounds playing. You are running from yourself. Hiroshi felt exposed. It was completely accurate. The samurai spent hours in solitude meditating, practicing, simply sitting, not because they were antisocial, but because they understood. If you cannot be alone with yourself, you do not have a self. You have only a collection of reactions to others. Yamamoto gestured to the quiet room. Solitude is where you meet who you actually are, beneath the performance, beneath the masks, beneath the roles you play for others. And that meeting, while sometimes uncomfortable, is essential. But won't I become isolated, lonely? There is a difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is being alone and suffering from it. Solitude is being alone and finding peace in it. The samurai who had mastered solitude were the best companions. They brought a centered self to relationships, not a desperate need. Practice. Establish a daily solitude boundary. Start with just 15 minutes. No phone, no music, no reading, no tasks. Just you, alone with your thoughts, your breath, your presence. This is not meditation with technique. This is simply being with yourself. Do this every day. At the same time, notice what arises. Notice how it changes. Notice how you begin to befriend yourself. Boundary 7. The boundary of comfort. The seventh boundary is uncomfortable. Yamamoto said with a slight smile. It is the boundary that says, I will not always choose comfort. He stood and opened the door to the garden. Rain still fell, cold and harsh. Come, Hiroshi hesitated. Exactly, Yamamoto said. Your first instinct is to remain comfortable. This instinct, followed habitually, creates weakness. He stepped into the rain. After a moment, Hiroshi joined him. The samurai trained in all weathers, all conditions. They learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Why? Because life does not respect your preference for ease. Hardship comes whether you are ready or not. Better to practice difficulty when you choose it than to face it only when forced. They stood in the downpour, water streaming down their faces. This is not about being masochistic, Yamamoto said. It is about expanding your capacity. Every time you choose the harder path when the easier is available, you tell yourself, I am capable of more than I think. I am not ruled by my craving for comfort. After several minutes, they returned inside. Hiroshi was shivering but felt strangely alive. The boundary is this. Regularly choose discomfort. Not constantly, that leads to burnout, but regularly enough that comfort never becomes your master. Practice. Establish 3 regular discomfort practices. Physical, cold showers, or fasting 1 day a week, or extra training when tired. Mental, studying difficult material, or learning a challenging skill. Social, having difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. The specific practice matters less than the principle. Regularly prove to yourself that you can endure what is hard. Boundary 8. The boundary of opinion. The 8th boundary, Yamamoto said as they dried off, is the boundary around others' opinions. He produced 2 scrolls, one ornate and beautiful, one simple and plain. Which would you choose? The ornate one is more valuable, Hiroshi said. Why? It's more beautiful, more detailed, according to whom? You have never seen what is written on either scroll, yet you judge by external appearance, by what others might think valuable. Yamamoto unrolled both scrolls. Each contains the same wisdom. The samurai learned to distinguish between internal and external validation. They had a saying, what others think of me is none of my business. But don't we need others' input? Shouldn't we care what people think? There is a difference between considering feedback and requiring approval. The samurai listened to wise counsel, but did not need others' approval to know his worth. His worth came from living by his code, not from others' opinions of whether he was doing so. Yamamoto looked directly at Hiroshi. You perform constantly. You adjust your behavior, your speech, your very personality based on who you are with and what you think they want to see. This is exhausting, and it prevents you from ever knowing yourself. The boundary is, I will live by my principles, whether others approve or not. I will listen to feedback, but I will not require approval. My self-respect comes from self-knowledge and self-honoring, not from external validation. Practice. Identify 3 areas where you regularly adjust yourself for others' approval. Choose one behavior that aligns with your values, but might invite disapproval. Do it anyway. Notice the discomfort of not having approval. Notice that you survive it. Notice that your self-respect actually increases when you honor your values over others' opinions. Gradually expand this boundary. Boundary 9. The boundary of excellence, the ninth and final boundary, Yamamoto said as evening approached, is the boundary of how you do what you do. He picked up a broom and began sweeping the floor with the same precision he had shown, making complete attention, proper form, thorough execution. The samurai applied excellence to everything, not just to sword technique, but to how they walked, how they ate, how they cleaned. Why? Because how you do anything is how you do everything. He handed the broom to Hiroshi. Sweep. Hiroshi began sweeping casually, the way he always had, quick, incomplete, his mind already elsewhere. Stop. Yamamoto's voice was sharp. You are not sweeping, you are going through the motions. There is dust you have not touched, areas you have missed, strokes that were careless. This is how you live your life, proximately, incompletely, without real attention. He demonstrated again, each stroke deliberate, coverage complete, the task done with dignity. The boundary is this: whatever I do completely. Not perfectly. Perfection is impossible, but completely, with full attention, to the best of my current ability. But some tasks don't deserve that level of attention. If a task is worth doing, it is worth doing with excellence. If it is not worth doing with excellence, why are you doing it at all? The samurai understood. Sloppy practice creates a sloppy mind. Careless execution of small things leads to careless execution of large things. Practice. Choose 3 daily tasks you usually do carelessly. For 30 days, do them with complete attention and your best effort. Sweeping, washing dishes, making your bed, whatever is mundane and tempting to rush. Notice how this practice of bounded excellence in small things begins to transform your approach to larger endeavors. The integration. As night fell, Yamamoto and Hiroshi sat in meditation posture, the rain having stopped, stars beginning to emerge. The 9 boundaries are not separate, Yamamoto said quietly. They are facets of a single practice, self-respect through self-regulation. He counted them off: time, word, attention, consumption, response, solitude, discomfort, opinion, excellence. 9 walls you build around yourself, not to imprison yourself but to protect the garden of your character from the weeds of chaos. It sounds overwhelming, Hiroshi admitted. How can I maintain all 9? You cannot, not at first. The samurai spent lifetimes refining these boundaries. You will start with 1. Yamamoto stood and helped Hiroshi to his feet. Choose the boundary that calls to you most strongly, the one you know you need most. Establish that boundary completely. Live within it for 3 months until it becomes natural. Then add a 2nd. Then a 3rd. In 9 months, you will have all 9 boundaries, Hiroshi asked. In 9 years, you will have begun to integrate them, Yamamoto corrected. These are not achievements to collect. They are practices to embody. The samurai knew. Discipline is not a destination. It is a direction. The promise at the temple gate. Before Hiroshi departed, Yamamoto handed him a scroll. This contains the 9 boundaries written in your hand. You wrote them earlier, remember? Hiroshi looked at the scroll, confused. He hadn't remembered writing anything. While you were drying off, I had you copy them. You did so without attention, mechanically. You already have the boundaries but do not yet live them. Yamamoto's weathered hand gripped Hiroshi's shoulder. The difference between the you who arrived today and the you who will return in 1 year is this. Today, you know about boundaries. In 1 year, you will be bounded. And that transformation from knowing to being is the entire journey. What if I fail? What if I set a boundary and break it? You will fail. Often. The boundary is not that you never fail. The boundary is that you acknowledge failure, accept its consequence, and re-establish the boundary. The samurai fell in battle, but they rose again. You will fall in practice, and you will rise again. He released Hiroshi's shoulder. Self-respect is not earned by never failing. It is earned by honoring your word to yourself, especially when it is difficult. The boundaries are not about perfection. They are about integrity. One more thing, Yamamoto said as Hiroshi began to walk away. The boundaries I taught you today, they are not my gift to you. You already knew them. Every person knows them. The difference is, the samurai chose to live them. Why are you telling me this? Because you came here today looking for someone to give you discipline, to give you strength, to give you purpose. I cannot give you these things. No one can, but you can claim them for yourself by establishing and honoring the boundaries only you can set. Hiroshi bowed deeply, understanding beginning to dawn. The boundaries are not restrictions, Yamamoto called after him. They are the architecture of freedom. A river without banks is not free, it is a swamp. But a river bounded by strong banks flows with power and purpose. You are that river. Now, go build your banks. The practice begins walking back through the now clear night. Stars brilliant overhead. Hiroshi unrolled the scroll and read the 9 boundaries he had mechanically copied. Time. I honor my time as I would honor a master's time word. My word is my bond. To myself, first attention. When I do something, I only do that thing. Consumption. I choose carefully what enters my body and mind. Response. I create a gap between stimulus and chosen response. Solitude. I regularly meet myself in silence. I choose the hard path when the easy is available opinion. I live by my code, not by others' approval excellence. How I do anything is how I do everything. He had written them without attention, without intention, without belief. They had been just words. But now, after a day of rain, and teaching, and transformation, they were invitations. Invitations to stop being a leaf blown by every wind, and to become a tree rooted in chosen principles. He thought of the samurai centuries dead, who had lived by these boundaries so completely that their example still taught. They had not been superhuman. They had simply been human beings who chose to impose structure on themselves, who built walls around their character and defended those walls as they would defend a castle. Hiroshi made a decision, not a wish, not a hope, but a decision. He would choose one boundary, the boundary of time, and honor it completely for 3 months. He would rise at the same time every day, train at the same time, sleep at the same time. No exceptions, no excuses, no negotiations with himself, and from that single boundary, honored completely. He would build the others as he walked through the night. The scroll in his hand felt different than it had when Yamamoto first gave it to him. It was no longer just writing. It was a promise to himself, and for the first time in his life, Hiroshi understood that was the only promise that truly mattered. The samurai had known a truth that modernity had forgotten. You cannot respect yourself if you do not keep your word to yourself. You cannot have inner strength if you have no inner structure. You cannot have discipline from the outside. It can only be built from within, one boundary at a time, one kept promise at a time, one chosen discomfort at a time. The path was clear now. Not easy, but clear. 9 boundaries, 9 walls around the garden of self, 9 commitments that would transform knowing into being. The journey had begun, and unlike the many times he had started before, started diets, started routines, started commitments that faded within days, this time felt different, because this time, he understood, he was not starting a program, he was establishing a boundary. And a boundary, once truly established, was not negotiable. The samurai way was not about motivation, which comes and goes like weather. It was about structure, which stands regardless of feeling. Hiroshi looked up at the stars, clear and distinct and unwavering in their courses, each following its path with absolute consistency. He would be like that, bounded, consistent, true. The rain had stopped, the path was clear, it was time to begin.